Welcome back to the deep dive. So, if you live anywhere near, an industrial park, a hospital, or even a chain restaurant, you definitely know Cintas Corporation, CTS. You've seen the crisp uniforms, the very distinct delivery trucks. They are one of those truly ubiquitous logistics operations in the United States and Canada. I mean, they're everywhere. They provide those essential sort of low-profile services that keep American business running. But the common, the initial impression of Cintas that they're just this massive laundry service that could not be further from the truth of their operation. You asked us to peel back the layers on this massive entity, and honestly, the scale, the complexity, and just the sheer financial muscle behind the scenes is genuinely staggering. Most people don't realize how a company that started by, simply washing dirty rags transformed into a multi-billion-dollar service powerhouse, a key component of the S&P 500, and really a master of industrial logistics. So that is our mission today, to unpack the sources and understand this phenomenal transformation from a humble family business to an absolute industrial giant. And this is not just about uniforms anymore. Cintas has built a total services ecosystem. We're talking industrial cleaning, first aid, fire safety management, complex compliance solutions. They have systematically positioned themselves as the absolute one-stop shop for business services.
And that idea of scale, of complexity, and that strategic positioning, that's the essential context we have to start with. Cintas is so much more than a successful regional operator. It is a major American publicly held corporation headquartered in Mason, Ohio. And what truly signals its relevance, its fundamental stability in the global market, is its presence on the market indices. It's traded on the NASDAQ Global Select Market under the symbol CTS. And critically, it is included in both the S&P 500 index and the NASDAQ 100 component list.
Which is a huge deal.
It's a huge deal. For our listeners who may not track indices daily, inclusion in the S&P 500 means the company is seen as a leading player in the U.S. economy. It's highly liquid, stable enough to be trusted by institutional investors globally. It just represents major market relevance.
Okay, so give us the numbers. What kind of scale are we actually talking about here?
To give you a snapshot of just how financially massive and, frankly, operationally efficient this company is, and these figures are very fresh, as of May 31st, 2025, Cintas is posting some serious, just eye-watering numbers for an industrial service company. Their total revenue is topping US $10.3 billion. But what's truly impressive is the profitability they generate from that revenue. We're talking about an operating income of US $2.36 billion and a net income of US $1.81 billion.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's just pause on that number for a moment. $1.81 billion in net income on $10.3 billion in revenue. That works out to a net profit margin of almost, 17.6%. For a company that relies so heavily on truck fleets, processing plants, a huge workforce, achieving margins like that seems almost, counterintuitive in a sector that's known for tight competition. So how do they do it? How does Cintas extract such a high level of profitability from services like laundry and mat delivery?
Well, that is the deep dive right there. It's not about the service itself. It's about the scale, the logistics optimization, and crucially, the stickiness of the contracts. They're not selling a one-off product. They're selling compliance and continuity.
Right.
Once Cintas manages your facility supplies, your uniforms, your first aid cabinets, and your fire extinguishers, the cost and the sheer hassle of switching vendors is substantial.
Mm-hmm.
So they leverage their scaled-up logistics network, that omnipresent delivery truck we talked about, to deliver multiple high-margin services at the same time, which dramatically lowers the marginal cost of adding a new service to an existing route. They have literally engineered themselves into being an essential, deeply integrated, and highly efficient utility for businesses.
That context is vital. This isn't a tech firm. This is a high-margin service company built on tangible, recurring, repeat business. And the financials clearly show just how successful they've been at executing that vertically integrated, optimized model.
Okay, let's unpack this business story from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this, because the founding story is almost impossibly humble, especially when you put it next to those, $10 billion revenue figures. We're talking about 1929, the year the company started. It was operating under this incredibly descriptive utilitarian name, Acme Industrial Laundry Company, a name that just tells you everything you need to know about the Great Depression-era economy and their focus.
Right.
It's a far cry from the modern, sleek, and kind of brand-agnostic.
Absolutely. The founders were Richard, who was known as Doc Farmer, and Amelia Farmer. And here is the core business model when they started. They were literally collecting old, used rags from factories, taking them back, laundering them using industrial processes, and then selling them back to those same businesses. mean, think about that for a moment. This was essentially a necessity-driven, low-margin industrial recycling and cleaning loop. It's so dramatically different from the complex logistics and proprietary software and high-tech inventory management of the modern Cintas. It just underscores that this massive corporation was built on the most fundamental necessity: cleaning up industrial waste and recycling essential materials.
And what's truly fascinating here is how Doc and Amelia achieved that initial stability. They did it by providing an absolutely essential cyclical service. They didn't sell a product once, they sold the service repeatedly week after week. The materials themselves were the lowest cost possible, used rags, but the service itself was continuous and guaranteed. This early model immediately established the principle of recurring revenue that really defines the company today. That idea that the customer rents the necessary material, whether it's a rag or a uniform, rather than buying it outright, that is the key structural component that was inherited from the very start.
And that continuity allowed for the first key generational shift, which began the modernization process. In the early 1940s, Doc's son, Herschel Farmer, took over the management. And this shift brought the first major service innovation, moving away from the unpredictability of just using scrap materials.
Yes, Herschel made a critical distinction. Instead of relying on collecting and cleaning old rags of varying quality and size, he replaced the old rags entirely with standardized shop towels.
Okay, that seems like a small distinction. A rag is a rag, right?
Well, it seems small, but it was massive strategically. It transformed the company from a simple laundry service dealing with inconsistent, unpredictable industrial supplies into a continuous service provider offering a standardized, quality-controlled product, the shop towel. And this standardization improved efficiency, quality control, and importantly, customer perception. The evolution was marked by the name change to Acme Wiper and Industrial Laundry. It reflects that shift toward a slightly more professional, uniform, and focused offering. It was all geared toward industrial maintenance. They were professionalizing the dirty work.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where the uniform giant we know today truly starts to take shape. Herschel's son, Richard Dick Farmer, joins the family business in 1957 after graduating from Miami University. And when he joins, the company is still incredibly small. It had only 12 employees at the time. It was a successful local family business, but certainly nowhere near an industrial giant yet.
Right.
The critical turning point happens just 2 years later, in 1959. Herschel hands the business over to Dick, and Dick initiates the expansion that is foundational to the modern company. He moves aggressively into uniform rental. This pivot was a stroke of genius because uniforms are essentially high-value, high-visibility shop towels. They require cleaning, repair, regular maintenance, sizing changes, replacement, all of which are guaranteed continuous revenue streams, often with better pricing and higher visibility than simply cleaning rags.
And that transition was not accidental or easy. Dick Farmer didn't just decide to clean clothes. He fundamentally engineered a better system. To execute this new uniform rental model, he worked directly with major material manufacturers, specifically Cintas Corporation, Graniteville, and Redcap, to develop a specialized 6-5-35 polycotton fabric blend.
I never realized that. They weren't just buying off the rack work clothes, they were engineering the very fabric. How unusual is that level of technical vertical control for what is essentially a logistics company?
It's incredibly unusual, but it goes right back to that core focus on efficiency and margin control. That technical engagement to standardize the product shows he wasn't interested in simply cleaning. He was interested in manufacturing and controlling the entire system of uniform service. By developing that proprietary polycotton blend, Cintas ensured the garments were highly durable, they resisted stains better, and they required less costly maintenance and replacement cycles. This technical control over the textile directly feeds the profit margin of the rental model. It ensures longevity and consistency for the customer, which increases that contractual stickiness we talked about earlier.
Right.
That drive for standardization and growth, especially as they began eyeing expansion outside of Cincinnati, mandated a consolidation and formalization of the corporate structure. And that leads us through a series of name changes right up to the IPO. The company became Acme Uniform and Towel Supply in 1964. But Dick Farmer was clearly looking beyond Ohio. In 1968, he founded the Satellite Corporation, opened the first satellite location outside the home market, specifically in Cleveland.
And that shows the blueprint, right? Establishing these repeatable, scalable service centers outside the immediate area. The two companies then merged in 1970, which streamlined the operation under a unified corporate banner. And finally, they landed on the brand name we know today, changing the official name to Cintas in 1972. It's a clean, sharp, non-descriptive name, purposefully vague, which allows them to move into any service line they choose. And that's exactly what they proceeded to do over the following decades. This foundational period culminated in the major financial milestone of the company going public in 1983.
Exactly.
And that IPO transformed the regional family business into a publicly funded growth vehicle, giving them the immense capital necessary for the aggressive acquisition strategy that would follow and define the next phase of the company.
It's just an incredible timeline when you trace that line of progress.
Yeah.
1929, dirty rags. 1959, engineered uniform rental. 1983, publicly traded growth engine. It speaks volumes not just about the vision of the Farmer family, especially Dick Farmer, but about their ability to identify and then fundamentally professionalize a highly fragmented industrial service market.
Now that we've established the foundation, that smart pivot to uniforms and the public offering, let's pivot and look at the current Cintas identity. If the uniform rental pivot was the engine, the aggressive M&A strategy we'll discuss shortly was the fuel. But first, what exactly does Cintas sell today, and how did they get to that $10.3 billion revenue figure by optimizing their logistics? Because it's much, much more than just the guy dropping off shirts on Tuesdays.
Oh, it truly is. It's a comprehensive services ecosystem designed to meet nearly every essential operating, compliance, and hygiene need for a non-manufacturing or industrial facility. They moved conceptually from being strictly uniform and towel providers to being a full-spectrum facility management and compliance company. The list of products and services Cintas provides is extensive and strategically layered to maximize cross-selling opportunities. They obviously handle the uniforms rental, lease, and sale, which remains a core, high-volume, continuous business. But then you layer on facility supplies. This includes heavy-duty floor mats, commercial mops, general cleaning supplies, and comprehensive restroom supplies.
And that's where the link back to the 1940s towel business is most clear, but it's been highly professionalized and standardized now.
Exactly. But then they make the crucial jump into mandated compliance.
Which is where the real money is.
That's where the real stickiness is. They expanded horizontally into crucial safety areas. First, safety and health products, primarily through their first aid and safety products division. This means stocking, monitoring, and replacing the contents of first aid cabinets and providing specialized safety equipment. Second, they entered fire protection, offering highly regulated services like fire extinguisher supply, inspection, testing services, and even safety courses. This shift from soft services like laundry to hard compliance services like fire and first aid is the core of their current growth strategy.
That's a huge shift in liability and expertise, but it makes perfect logistical sense, as we touched on earlier. If you already have a Cintas driver, known internally as a service sales representative or SSR, going to a business every week to pick up dirty uniforms and drop off clean ones, the cost of that truck rolling is already paid for. So it's incredibly efficient for that same SSR to also restock the first aid cabinet, check the tags on the fire extinguisher, and drop off a new, freshly laundered floor mat.
That is the operational magic. They transformed the logistics model into a true integrated sales and service channel. The discussion point here is vital. Connecting the early rag and towel cleaning business to this current full spectrum of facility services reveals a logical, sustained expansion. It was based on proximity, recurring need, and compliance necessity. They didn't start selling, specialized industrial robotics. They expanded horizontally into adjacent, repetitive, high-margin services that leverage the exact same customer base and supply chain infrastructure.
Right.
And that dramatically reduced the marginal cost of customer acquisition for each new service line.
So let's ground this with the massive financial snapshot we mentioned earlier, based on that May 31st, 2025 data. Those numbers aren't just big, they scream efficiency and market dominance.
Looking at the precise figures, this level of operation is just immensely robust. The total revenue is US $10.3 billion, which demonstrates consistent and reliable demand for their standardized services. More telling, however, is the high level of profitability. We're talking about an operating income of US $2.36 billion and a net income of US $1.81 billion. Those phenomenal margins reflect the high efficiency of their scaled, standardized logistics model and the unparalleled stickiness of their recurring contracts.
It all comes back to that stickiness.
It does. Remember that when a business relies on Cintas for things like first aid cabinet refills or mandatory fire safety compliance checks, they are outsourcing legal responsibility. This creates an extremely high barrier to exit. Switching providers often means retraining staff, updating multiple contracts, and risking non-compliance during the transition.
Mm.
Cintas leverages this inherent market inertia into consistent, predictable, high-margin revenue.
So, in essence, they have transformed what looks like a low-tech business laundry and delivery into a high-tech, data-driven logistics business that specializes in regulatory compliance management.
Precisely. And furthermore, the balance sheet strength is critical for their future growth. The total assets of US $9.83 billion and total equity of US $4.68 billion solidify their capability to continue their aggressive growth and acquisition strategy without overextending. And the human capital footprint is huge, 48,300 employees as of 2025. This is an increase from the 44,500 employees reported in 2023, which signals ongoing operational growth and the successful integration of newly acquired businesses and expanded service routes.
And it's worth briefly noting the ownership structure because this is still fundamentally a farmer family story, despite the public listing. Scott D. Farmer, Dick Farmer's son, and the former CEO, remains a significant owner holding 13.9% of the shares.
It's a huge stake.
It is, and that ongoing substantial family stake reinforces the dynastic nature of the corporation. It suggests a very long-term view of strategic decision-making, which contrasts sharply with many modern publicly traded companies that are purely managed by non-owner executives.
And speaking of size and recognition, the external validation is just undeniable. Their commercial success has placed them firmly on the Fortune 500 list for 6 consecutive years, spanning 2018 through 2023. And this isn't just a vanity list. It reflects consistent, high-level financial performance and market capitalization among the largest corporations in the U.S.
Okay, now let's take a breath and transition from the high-powered finance to the slightly more quirky side of the business. You have this massive, aggressive, financially dominant corporation, and then you have their public relations strategy, which is unique. They host the annual America's Best Restroom contest, which they've been doing since 2002. It's a moment of, I don't know, conversational dissonance, right? On one hand, we're talking about $2.3 billion in operating income. On the other, we're discussing public facility aesthetics. Why does Cintas invest time and effort into this specific, slightly humorous public outreach?
Well, it is a brilliant example of highly targeted, low-cost marketing that just cuts through the noise. Cintas is a major supplier of cleaning products, restroom supplies, and hygiene services. So by sponsoring a widely publicized, slightly humorous contest about the quality of public restrooms, they achieve several goals at once. First, they reinforce their expertise and their commitment to facility hygiene. Second, it generates free media coverage, making their brand memorable far beyond the confines of industrial procurement managers and reaching the general public. It connects the mundane, a clean bathroom, to the aspirational, the best in America, in a way that just reinforces their service offering.
It's smart. They take a necessary but, unsexy business service and give it a playful, highly shareable public face. It's a perfect bridge between their operational complexity and the public's perception of hygiene standards.
So let's shift now to the real engine of modern Cintas. Its aggressive growth and merger and acquisition, or M&A strategy. This truly accelerated after the 1983 IPO, specifically ramping up in the late 1990s and early 2000s. After gaining that public capital, the mission became fundamentally about consolidation and expansion.
Right.
They pursued a dual strategy: geographic expansion and horizontal service expansion. The first major step beyond U.S. borders came in 1995 with the expansion into Canada. They did that by acquiring Cadet Uniform Service Ltd. This demonstrated their intent to dominate the entire North American market.
And then came the other part of the strategy.
Yes, and came the crucial horizontal expansions into non-uniform services. In 1997, they made a strategic pivot by entering the first aid and safety business. This move is critical because, unlike uniforms, which are rented, first aid cabinets and regulatory compliance require mandatory regular servicing and stocking to adhere to workplace safety laws. This locks in another essential, high-margin, recurring, and legally mandated revenue stream.
And this expansion period also saw significant leadership changes, which were clearly designed to manage this rapid, complex growth. Bob Kohlhepp became CEO in 1996, taking the reins from Dick Farmer, who became chairman of the board. Then, in July 1998, the next generation, Scott Farmer, who had been with the company since 1981, became president and chief operating officer.
Right. So this established a dynamic executive framework ready to execute a massive M&A push in the coming decades. It ensured generational continuity and vision combined with seasoned operational leadership.
Okay, let's focus on those major acquisition clusters in the early 2000s, because Cintas was clearly in a hurry to build out its full-service, compliance-focused identity. In 2002, they acquired a whole suite of companies. First, the uniform rental company Omni Services, which demonstrated continued market consolidation in their core business. Second, and more importantly for diversification, they acquired several first aid companies, Petragon, American First Aid, and Respond Industries.
And these first aid acquisitions were not about incremental growth. They were designed to instantly establish scale and expertise in that crucial new safety market. They weren't just acquiring inventory, they were acquiring existing customer contracts, logistics routes, and the regulatory know-how required to handle occupational health services.
So they were buying market share.
Instantly.
Yeah.
And they didn't stop there. In 2003, they targeted another government-mandated safety area, formally entering the fire safety market with the acquisition of campfire equipment. If you look at this cluster of acquisitions uniforms, first aid, and fire safety, you can see Cintas consciously building the complete facility compliance package. They were efficiently buying expertise and market share simultaneously, turning their delivery truck into a multi-service compliance hub.
But the real game changers came between 2015 and 2017 with these large-scale strategic purchases designed to cement their dominance in specific markets. In 2015, Cintas acquired Z Medical from Cintas Corporation for approximately $130 million.
Right, and this was a significant strategic boost to their first aid portfolio. They acquired a highly recognizable name and further expanded their reach in the occupational health services sector. It signaled that they weren't just satisfied with their existing first aid footprint.
But here is where we hit the absolute peak of their M&A history, as listed in the sources. The year 2017 saw Cintas execute its largest acquisition to date, the purchase of G&K Services for a staggering $2.2 billion.
This was not a small strategic entry into a new market. This was the acquisition of a massive primary competitor in the core uniform and facility services space. It was a move of pure market consolidation, immediately solidifying Cintas' position at the top of the industry food chain, virtually unchallenged in terms of scale and geographic coverage.
Let's dedicate some time to that deal. The $2.2 billion G&K deal. I mean, it's hard to overstate the significance of a $2.2 billion expenditure in this industry. It wasn't just about adding customers, it fundamentally changed the competitive dynamics of the entire sector. What were the specific operational and strategic challenges they would have faced integrating such a massive competitor?
Well, integrating a rival of G&K size is immensely complex and usually takes years. Strategically, the goal was simple: eliminate the rival and absorb its market share. Operationally, though, the challenges were huge. First, route optimization. They had to meticulously merge G&K's delivery routes with Cintas' existing routes, identifying redundancies and eliminating duplicate journeys to maximize efficiency and reduce fuel and labor costs.
That alone sounds like a nightmare.
It is. And second, facility consolidation. Cintas likely inherited numerous G&K processing plants and distribution centers. They had to decide which facilities to keep, offer the newest or most technologically advanced, and which to retire or sell. This leads to massive capital expenditure in the short term, but huge savings in utility and labor costs long term.
And what about the people?
Third, and perhaps the most difficult, cultural integration. Merging two large workforces, often with different compensation structures, operational procedures, and, frankly, rivalries, is a monumental management challenge. This wasn't just a balance sheet transaction. It was a fundamental reorganization of the North American uniform and facility services landscape.
So this deal allowed them to enforce their standardized service model, which we know relies on that proprietary polycotton blend and highly optimized logistics, across a much broader, previously contested footprint, which would make them exponentially more efficient and profitable. If we review the other major acquisitions mentioned, Unode Company in 1999 and Omni Services in 2002, they were clearly building blocks, but G&K was the consolidation grand finale, at least for a time.
That G&K acquisition is often cited as a textbook example of leveraging public capital. The proceeds and market confidence gained from that 1983 IPO and subsequent growth to fundamentally restructure an industry. It allowed Cintas to streamline operations, eliminate duplicate infrastructure, and use their increased buying power for everything from new textiles to truck fleets.
And this leads us directly to the most recent evidence of their ongoing, relentless quest for market dominance: the attempt to acquire UniFirst Corporation in 2025. What's fascinating here is that even after absorbing G&K, they were still aggressively trying to swallow the next largest competitor, UniFirst. It illustrates that Cintas views the uniform services market as a zero-sum game where scale is the ultimate defense.
It really highlights the ongoing competitive pressure. Cintas announced plans to acquire UniFirst in January 2025, but the sources note that this proposal actually dated back to repeated rejections, first dating back to February 2022.
Wow, so a multi-year effort.
A sustained multi-year attempt to force consolidation, yes.
However, the outcome was not the same as G&K. The discussion ceased in March 2025 due to disagreements about the proposal's structure, likely focused on valuation or maybe antitrust risks. And this illustrates a critical point. While Cintas has been extremely successful in M&A, the uniform services market still has entrenched players who are capable of resisting their aggressive proposals. It shows that the pursuit of total consolidation remains an aggressive, ongoing competitive strategy rather than a finished project.
Exactly. The financial muscle of Cintas is undeniable, but it does not guarantee victory in every acquisition attempt. Shifting focus now, let's look at the leadership structure that guided this massive expansion, particularly the continuing Farmer legacy and the subsequent transitions, which are essential to understanding the company's culture and direction, a direction defined by continuity and aggressive growth.
Okay.
So, following those late 90s executive transitions, Scott Farmer's role continued to expand significantly. He served as the chief executive officer from 2003 all the way until 2021, overseeing the massive diversification and the later large-scale consolidation deals. During his tenure, the executive structure was solidified. Philip Holloman became president and COO in 2008. That same year, the founding generation figure, Dick Farmer, transitioned to chairman emeritus, a title that acknowledges his immense contribution without requiring active management, while Bob Kohlhupp became chairman of the board.
It sounds like a very carefully managed, smooth transition of power, keeping foundational figures involved while elevating seasoned professional executives.
It was. The family influence, however, remained profoundly strong at the very top. In 2016, Scott Farmer added the title of chairman of the board to his CEO role, further consolidating his leadership position just ahead of that massive G&K acquisition in 2017. This ensured that the deal was executed under the direct guidance of the Farmer family, reinforcing that dynastic commitment to market dominance.
And the most recent major transition happened in 2021. Scott Farmer retired from the CEO position, though, again, retaining an influential title, becoming executive chairman. His replacement was Todd Schneider, who had previously served as executive vice president and COO.
Right.
Schneider's selection, coming from within the executive ranks, suggests a commitment to continuity and the established Cintas growth model. They clearly prioritized internal experience and stability over bringing in outside leadership.
And, on a more somber note, the source material reminds us of the origin of the dynasty. Founder Dick Farmer died in August 2021 at the age of 86. His passing marked the end of an era for the family's direct operational involvement as founders, though the sophisticated multi-billion-dollar corporation he built, alongside his father and son, continues to dominate the industrial service industry today.
So, what does this aggressive growth and operational scale mean for the company's operating environment? I mean, no company of this size, with nearly 50,000 employees and hundreds of facilities, operates without facing public scrutiny and significant operational challenges, particularly concerning labor relations and safety standards. It's important to neutrally examine the pressures Cintas has faced.
It is.
We need to present the facts regarding a significant 2009 legal ruling that involved the labor union, Unite Here. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit upheld a ruling stating that the union violated the privacy of thousands of Cintas employees in Pennsylvania. The violation was specific and serious. The union was found to have illegally obtained employee license plate numbers in order to trace and access their home addresses and other personal information.
This specific incident is highly instructive. It shows the intense, often high-stakes environment of labor relations in large, non-unionized industrial services companies. The union's decision to employ tactics like obtaining license plate data suggests the difficulty of reaching Cintas employees through conventional means, likely due to the highly distributed nature of the workforce across different service centers and the company's established opposition to unionization.
Just a ruling.
The court ruling affirmed that while unions have a right to organize, they cannot violate employee privacy laws in the process. For Cintas, this ruling provided a legal victory and reinforced their ability to operate without union interference, while at the same time highlighting the ongoing intensity and complexity of the labor conflict they face across their vast operational footprint. Handling persistent legal and labor challenges just becomes a continuous operating cost for a corporation of this scale.
And furthermore, we have to look at operational integrity, specifically safety standards, which are paramount in high-volume industrial laundry facilities. The sources detail an investigation following the tragic death of an employee in Tulsa, Oklahoma in March 2007. This was an incredibly serious incident that triggered immediate external scrutiny.
Absolutely. The investigation focused on workplace safety protocols and equipment failure at the laundry facility. When an incident results in a fatality, it immediately engages regulatory bodies, most notably the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA. The resulting analysis suggested serious issues with operational procedures and machine guarding.
And the response to this incident was significant and national in scope. Following the investigation, both unions and several members of Congress publicly called for stricter health and safety standards, specifically at Cintas laundry facilities.
When an internal operational failure triggers a direct response from both labor organizations and the highest levels of government, it signals major pressure on the company to not only review, but fundamentally reform its operational safety protocols company-wide. This public and political pressure forced Cintas to invest substantially in safety upgrades, new equipment, improved training, and more rigorous compliance auditing over the subsequent years.
Right.
This incident served as a dramatic and costly reminder that massive scale comes with immense accountability and that operational failures can quickly translate into regulatory intervention and long-term compliance costs.
So the sheer scale of Cintas means any single operational failure, particularly one involving worker safety, can quickly become a national issue. The fact that the call was specifically for stricter health and safety standards at their laundry facilities suggests a focused concern regarding the industrial processes used to clean and process the vast quantities of textiles that form the core of their high-volume business. Maintaining high safety standards is an enormous and continuous challenge that requires significant capital expenditure and regulatory adherence across hundreds of facilities and nearly 50,000 employees. It must directly impact their operational costs and public reputation.
Indeed, the scrutiny generated by such incidents is a key operational factor. It forces continuous focus on compliance and worker protection, which is essential to the company's long-term reputation and operational cost structure. It's the flip side of their high efficiency. That efficiency must be balanced with meticulous adherence to complex safety regulations.
Okay, let's summarize this incredible journey. What started in 1929 as the Acme Industrial Laundry Company washing used factory rags, a necessity business run by Richard and Amelia Farmer, has completed a massive successful transformation. It grew through smart pivots, first to shop towels, then critically into engineered uniform rental by Dick Farmer, and then just exploded into a $10.3 billion diversified service giant, providing everything from uniforms and facility supplies to fire safety and first aid compliance.
The story of Cintas is defined by two characteristics that are mutually reinforcing and highly effective in corporate growth. First, the deep, sustained generational leadership of the Farmer family, which provided consistent, long-term vision over many decades. And second, the aggressive, strategic acquisition growth, exemplified by the $2.2 billion G&K Services purchase, which cemented their market dominance and allowed them to achieve those enviable, industry-leading profit margins. They built an immensely profitable business not by inventing a new technology, but by standardizing, professionalizing, and aggressively consolidating necessary industrial services into a high-efficiency logistics model.
So the knowledge gained here provides crucial context for understanding the backbone of the industrial service economy. When you see that Cintas truck next time, you're not just seeing laundry delivery. You're seeing a highly sophisticated, financially powerful logistics and compliance network that manages safety, adherence to regulation, and supply for nearly every kind of business operation across North America.
And that leads us to our final thought for you to mull over. Cintas' history is clearly one of leveraging acquisitions and public capital to consolidate the service market, moving from a fragmented industry to one dominated by a few giants.
Right.
We saw the record G&K deal and the aggressive ongoing attempt to acquire UniFirst even recently in 2025. This raises an important question for the future of industrial services. How much further can this consolidation go in the uniform and essential business services industry before the market structure itself fundamentally shifts?
That's a great question.
At what point do antitrust or regulatory concerns about market dominance begin to outweigh the economic benefits of Cintas' immense efficiency and scale? That is something to consider as you observe the industry landscape going forward, especially as Cintas continues to flex its financial muscles to eliminate competition.
Something profound to think about the next time you see a spotless floor mat or a crisply pressed uniform. Thanks for diving deep with us.